Now, wisdom had been the key word of Buddha's teaching from the beginning, as his discovery of a benign reality at the heart of the universe, as being accessible to the living being, especially with the human life form, accessible only through knowledge, at first rational and intellectual, and ultimately experimental and experiential. Wisdom in Buddhist psychology, Sanskrit prajna, means sharp intelligence, most simply pra meaning super, and nya the verbal root for knowing, cognate with the Greek gno, whence our English knowing gets its silent K. It is the human faculty par excellence, and is what knows both nirvana and also the good and bad of the worldly things, realities and unrealities. In the core universal vehicle teaching, it can be perfected or become transcendent when it completely knows something, going beyond conceptual recognition of its object as a separate subject, and in a sense empathically merging with the reality of the object, sort of like a CAT scan can reflect the structure of the brain or body by merging its field with the body's atomic and subatomic components. This is the famous prajna paramita, the transcendent wisdom or perfect wisdom, which gives its name to the foundation teachings of the universal vehicle, the Prajna Paramita Sutra, of which there are 18 versions of different lengths. The difference, of course, between the human transcendent wisdom and a CAT scan is that the merger of subject and object of the human wisdom transforms what had seemed distinct, and not just a matter of reproducing an image. The merged reality is beyond reproduction, one could say, and so the report given is that it is beyond the range of speech, concept, or image. But lest you imagine some utterly alien thing waiting out there as, quote, reality, unquote, the experience of eating a delicious apple is also really beyond words. Any poet will assure you. And yet it is quite a familiar thing, and you can talk about aspects of it endlessly, while never actually capturing the full reality of digging into a delicious, crunchy, delicious apple. The way in which the seeker is taught to attain such wisdom is by rational, critical, analytic investigation of any and all things, by taking them apart, breaking them into their components, and their components into components, and so on down to atomic and subatomic components, doing this thought experiment not by external machinery, with the report coming back, individual researcher after researcher, century after century, that finally there is no solid, analysis-resistant thing, physical or mental, spatial or temporal, that stands itself irreducible, and so exists the way it appears to exist on first inspection. When a supernormally concentrated analytic attention reaches to the point of seeing through even the most subtle particle or moment, what happens is that, beyond a frightening threshold of seemingly consciousness obliterating apparent nothingness, the stabilized subtle awareness itself dissolves along with any apparent object, and one feels bodilessly and point of subjectivity-lessly afloat in or as limitless space and time. Here you can go back to what I said earlier about analyzing a point on a Cartesian graph. When you analyze it, the little dot that you see, you realize is not the point. And in fact, the actual point has no size and no dimension. And you therefore sort of disappear into X, Y to be exactly in a particular place. So if you consider that little thought experiment we just did together, and you add to it a really powerful one-pointed concentration, you can understand, have a hint of, the type of experience that the Buddhist inner scientist experiences when entering into the meditation of emptiness. This state is known as, quote, space-like equipoised samadhi, unquote. And it is both a powerful release, but also a potentially dangerous trap. It is a release since it seems to be an experience of what was imagined to be an absolute state, a nirvana state, a freedom state, a release state, without bodily sensation except for the feeling of floating free, released from such a constricting thing as circumcised sensation. The danger of it as a potential trap is that it cannot be the absolute, as it is a lone space place apart from the conventional, the differentiated, and a lone time after when one was involved in such transitory sensations and experiences, since in order to be apart and after, it has spatial and temporal boundaries, though one doesn't feel them immediately. The point is, though it seems like one's negational idea of the absolute is being experienced, it also is not what it appears to be, just like any other relative thing, and therefore is itself only conventional and relative. But how can one know that, since in that state, language and reason are not overtly functioning, and there's no sense of separate body or separate mind? Here, then, is the often poorly understood role of reason in relation to supernormal concentration, or samadhi. One knows ahead of time that any state, even a seemingly stateless state, that is apart from any other state, is only relative, and no relative being can encounter through any relative faculty any absolute as an isolable object. This rational knowledge, known as the royal reason of relativity, a rational knowledge of emptiness, inferential knowledge of emptiness, immunizes the investigator, psychonaut, scientist, navigator of the inner mind, that is, from being trapped in the most powerful release state imaginable. The blessed feelingless feeling of absolute isolated disappearance from the relative world itself disappears as the relative world of differentiated feelings reappears, and one enters what is called the illusory or dreamlike aftermath samadhi. The momentum of the royal reason of relativity ensures one's trajectory beyond the space and time of space-like samadhi, which implies that one needs to have understood that reasoning thoroughly before developing such supernormal concentration to the max. The subsequent progress of the yogic investigator, psychonaut, experimenter is often described as a kind of oscillation, again and again investigating things and floating beyond, again and again returning and coping with relations, until the final goal is reached, where one's mind embraces both cognitively dissonant states simultaneously and can engage causally and responsibly and compassionately in relational things without losing the sense of free floating in limitless space and time. There is a huge scientific literature about the phenomenology of this kind of experience, but this is enough for now. Let me just say, in relation to the table, you can see at this point that the Buddha taught the individual vehicle, disciples, this non-duality by hinting through his teaching of what is called the four formless realms: infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothing whatsoever, state of nothing whatsoever, and state of beyond consciousness and unconsciousness, where he described what your individual vehicle escapist practitioner seeking relief from the pain of individuation imagines to be a state of absoluteness. Bodiless states of space and consciousness and nothingness and even beyond consciousness and unconsciousness. And then clearly says none of these brothers is nirvana. So actually the hint is no escape, but I don't press you with that. Keep trying.